Thank you so much. All right, so we'll kind of get started right in on part two. I brought along a book, The Shape of the Past, it's Dr. John Warwick Montgomery. So I may kind of overlap some with some ideas of his. I kind of came up with some of these ideas previously and then read his book, and there's some things that kind of overlap. All right, so I talked yesterday about the idea that historians and we as teachers of history are, in a sense, cartographers of the past. We're creating a map for our students. And so a few pictures to give us an idea of what does our map look like. Traditional sort of Eastern views, and for a large part of the classical Greeks and Romans, we have a view that's maybe, here's your map might look something like this. Okay, it's cyclical. Right. Okay, we're going, this is the past, this is the future for all my maps. So we have things rise, things fall. We go in cycles. The ancient Mesopotamians, so some of these things that Dr. Calvert's been talking about, or think about, the Epic of Gilgamesh kind of illustrates this. They're really pretty much a flat line. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's a part where he overreaches, he strives for too much, and God, no, this is how it was, this is how it will be. Things go on. Okay, so you have kind of a flat line. The evolutionary view of things would be what direction? Oh. Okay, so the evolutionary or the Whiggish view of things, things are getting better. People in the past were pretty dumb. We are going to be much better. We're headed upward, and there's, any of these could have a little bit of a jagged line to them, but basically everything's getting better. The Chicken Little view is everything's going down, like, all right, so, woo, okay. And I think, actually, this one we have to be a little careful we don't fall into. It's pretty easy to see, that last stanza of that hymn, in these gray and latter days. It feels like that. But despite even, our knowledge that, yes, Christ has told us of what will come at the end, we're not in the days of Noah, Things have been so bad God destroyed all but 8 people on the earth. And so we are not really subscribing to that. Things are just getting continually worse. So that leaves us with what is our view. And this could, you can tweak this a little. Oh boy, that's not going to work well. Is this?
There's some Phoenix right there. So that might
write on
better.
this board? Well, how about if I just...
Don't write on that board.
Yeah, thanks, Pastor. Okay, I'll just do it over here. We'll just make it work. All right, so this is my conception of what does our history look like. So, this is going to be a mess. And then we've got kind of like this sort of thing going on. In the middle of this, we have a cross. There's the fall in this thing. There is something significant to be remembered there. And after that, you could do, I think Dr. Montgomery did something a little more cyclical down here. There are ups and downs. There is sin. There are risings and fallings. It's not a flat line. It's not just trending up or down, but it's focused on the cross. And this, I think, is important for us to remember that we have a faith that is grounded in history. Our faith stands or falls on historical facts. Christ, who actually was born into time and actually rose from the dead. That's something that is historical. It's not just a philosophical religion. Okay, so because I have to go really fast, we're going to history and anthropology. We can't have one without the other. History always involves humans. Okay, there's the evangelical sort of. I have a partial evangelical background, so some of these things stand out in my mind. You get this his story. It's all about this is Christ's story. No, I would disagree. Justification is his story, but history is primarily the study of humans, and Christ enters into that, which is, I think, even more amazing. Even evolutionists, as we mentioned yesterday, they'll say, things before written human records, those are prehistoric. Okay? History is the story of humans, and God enters into that. History, I think, is also a very humane study, meaning that it is something that helps us understand who we are as humans. By looking at others in history, it helps us understand that. And it's a two-way street. What we believe about history probably influences what we believe about humans, but what we believe in our anthropology certainly affects how we're going to study and teach history. So this is going to inform the patterns that we see in history. We believe man is sinful. This informs what we see in history. It's good to keep these things in mind. A little quote from this book, Shapes the Past, Dr. Montgomery says, "It cannot be emphasized too strongly that the most dangerous historians have not been those with definite convictions, but those who have been unaware of their convictions." Okay, so we need to know what it is we believe if we're going to teach history in a way that is not going to be dangerous, quite frankly. If we don't know what it is we are aiming at with history, it's a dangerous thing. So my question to be, I don't know why I went for the cheesy Shakespeare thing, but that's okay. To be didactic or not to be didactic, that is a question. All right, do you want history to try and instill something in your students, to teach them some specific lesson? All right, well, we're pretty sure that we're going to say yes, but we know there are a lot of things that we want to avoid while saying yes. So our first danger here is the Whiggish danger. This is we're getting better. You know, Lutherans were the chosen people, and our history is on the up and up, and we're getting better. If you subscribe to something like this, where we've got this overall we are getting better view, in our map, we tend to get the map of fairyland. It leaves, you overlook details that might go against your theory of how things are getting better. And, you know, that tends then to overlook sin as well, which is not a good thing to overlook, theologically or historically. My favorite example of this, is part of my evangelical background, 7th and 8th grade, before that too. I was homeschooled all the way up, and we used a Becca curriculum, which, if any of you know, is really fundamentalist, good stuff. And it's great. I learned lots of history. That's probably where I, got my first love of history. But this is a fantastic quote from the World History on the Middle Ages, just to give you an idea of what dangers we could run into. Most paintings during the Middle Ages were flat. They lacked a sense of depth or perspective. People and things did not appear real and natural the way God created them, in bold. If men do not see God right, they will not see themselves right. The distorted Christianity of the Middle Ages inevitably distorted art. That's quite a claim to make. Okay, this is, my mother would call this, Catholic bashing. It's very much the, anything that was Roman Catholic was wrong. Therefore, Christianity for the entire Middle Ages was wrong. Their art was wrong. I always, in my later days, I would go back and ask, so the realistic art of the Greeks and Romans means we should worship the pagan gods? Drawing these kind of, very, very simple, this, therefore, this connection, I think it's a danger we have to be careful of. So this is, particularly as you're looking at textbooks, a lot of the Christian history textbooks have this danger where they have a specific agenda that leaves out important things, oversimplifies things, and is not what we want to go for. So at the other extreme, danger B is the relativistic danger. Maybe we see this more prominently at the upper levels, high school, college level of things. I think both this and the next one, I'm going to say, this is, anybody who proclaims these things says, I'm not teaching you anything, and they are really teaching you some specific lessons. So, no, these are both impossible anyhow. So the relativistic danger would be, we deny that objectivity is possible at all. Since everybody stands, and you can't stand in exactly the same place and time twice, nobody will have the same perspective on history. It's impossible, and so therefore everybody just draws their own lessons, and it all doesn't matter. This is not acceptable. History is not opinion, it's not fiction, it is fact, it's based on truth, it is factual, and I think this is where we can bring in something I'll have to mention in passing, is an idea of biases and prejudices. We all have biases. Bias is a word used for textiles, right? If you've ever sewn anything, you know where the bias is. Mm-hmm. It pulls in a certain way. That's part of the cloth you're made from, in that sense. You have biases, and we want our children to have biases as well. We want their stretch to go in line with the worldview that we have. Prejudices are, I think, an avoidable thing, to prejudge, to judge something before you have examined it without knowing about it or thinking about it. That is avoidable. And I think that's kind of how we might begin to address this idea of relativism is, no, there will be a bias to what we have. It doesn't mean that we're prejudiced and we're not going to listen to other things or look at things that are complex and difficult. All right, the objectivist danger, I can't claim that I'm the first person who picked this quote to go with it. This is from Richard II, Shakespeare's play, "Let us sit upon the ground and tell sad stories of the deaths of kings." Let's just sit around and we'll tell sad stories about what happened. Period. The end. There's no purpose beyond that. History is an end in itself. This is, one of the things I read for this presentation I was getting ready was Herbert Butterfield, who speaks against the view of the Whiggish interpretation of history, but he basically ends up with this objectivist view, which is quite the extreme, and I think impossible. As a human being, can you really just hear stories of what happened and say, that is an interesting story, no connection to me, okay, I will go on about my business. And if we could do that, wouldn't that be deadly boring? Who wants to do that? So I don't think that this is not a feasible way of having dealing with the didactic problem. So this is all me making this up as we go along, and you can object to anything you want. So my via media, I think this is a very Lutheran way to approach things. Most Lutheran doctrine ends up somewhere right in that sweet middle way of things. First, we should remember there is truth in history. We are pursuing truth. And while we cannot go back to the past and see every aspect of everything, we are pursuing truth. We recognize that we have biases that color our understanding, and that's why that quote from Dr. Montgomery, we realize, you realize what your ideas are there. And this is why we want to get our anthropology right. What do we know about man? Okay, so this is why we teach our children theology from a young age. Because if you don't know your theology, what are you going to do with history? You're going to go off somewhere else. So you need to know, all right, man is sinful, what God's grace does, all of that leads into how we view human beings who are the content of history. Another thing I think to keep in mind is if we're making maps of the past, you need to know for whom and for what purpose you're making your maps. So we can keep in mind a map may look very different. A map of the same area may look very different, but that does not mean if I have my Rand McNally Atlas of the United States and I have my kindergarten puzzle with the shapes of the states and nothing else, that does not mean that kindergarten map is a lie. It is a true representation of the United States, but it's not including everything. Later on, that child will look at more and more. I think history is similar. We cannot, have our preschool students debating the causes of the Civil War. It's not good. We're going to give them simple things. That does not mean that we're lying to them. So as we pursue truth, we know that, what we're giving them is age appropriate, and there's more to come. We'll continue to study it. In addition to that, then, so if we have to condense things down for younger students, there's always a danger in that. Whenever you condense, you have to leave out certain things. Yeah. But it's also necessary, because if you're going to accomplish anything at all, we can't have the life-size map. It's pointless. So we have to be intentional in what it is we're going to include or not. kind of in conjunction with some of these things, I'm going to point out too, I don't think history can provide teleological answers. Answers is the purpose of why we're here. We need theology for this. And the theology informs the history, not so much the other way around. So Scripture then becomes the guide for what didactic purposes we want to have with history. Okay? What do we need to know about men from history? We're going to look at Scripture, which informs our anthropology. That informs our history. So, you know, as we read through history with children, through human beings, it becomes almost automatic to connect our lives to them. This is, if you think about literature that you read with students too, you automatically find some connection to characters in history as well as in literature, I think. You think about, okay, do I want to be like this person or not like this person? What do I like about this person or not? It's the nature of a narrative, that it draws us out of our own personal little life into a different world where we can imagine all these things. And I'm going to introduce a term here that, again, my coining, and it may not be the best, but I think it helps children develop an empathetic imagination. You imagine what it's like to be somebody else. That's sort of what empathy requires, is that ability to put yourself in somebody else's place. And that, again, I think is a good way of working in the constant work of defeating the sinful nature. We have to draw ourselves out of ourselves, put ourselves in other places. If we think about what kind of history lessons, what lessons we draw from history, they're not going to be simplistic. We can't just say the art of the Middle Ages was distorted because their Christianity was distorted. Ta-da! You know, obviously, if you get this wrong, I have a colleague who's fond of telling her students, history is messy. And it kind of is. You know, things don't connect. It's not a clear, simple causal chain. There are many possibilities. Again, that doesn't mean you throw that all at your kindergarten students, you know, well, let me tell you everything and confuse you. No, but you don't want to ignore this fact, or otherwise you get, I guess what I can think of is the Santa Claus effect, you know, people that have been given something very simple when they're young, and later on they find out this is not quite that simple. Life is not quite that simple. It can shake their faith. And so as we acknowledge that human beings are sinful and yet redeemed, that we are, you know, the old and the new man fighting within, this connects to history, and it should, so we don't just end up, you know, with somebody later on discovers, wait a minute, you told me Thomas Jefferson was the great founding father at the end. He was also a deist and a slaveholder, and now what do I do with that? You know, it can be distressing, I think, to students. So, again, our theology gives us an advantage because human beings are not simple. We're not, you know, okay, I accepted Jesus, and now every day in every way I'm getting better and better. It's a constant struggle, and I think that our view of history will reflect that. So as we go along, it's, I guess, just important always to keep in mind our own biases, which we're trying to align correctly, and anything that you're going to use, keep in mind the author's biases and whether they're matching up with what you want or not. So another little quote from Dr. Montgomery: the Christian historian will always compare an act with its existential alternatives before arriving at a judgment, and his judgment will never be absolutely white or absolutely black. For the former is possible only in heaven, and the latter only in hell. But this is kind of useful, because sometimes we don't, you know, there's a struggle that goes on. Okay, we're pursuing truth, so it should be black and white. But in fact, there are gray areas, and that's the nature of life in this world. Okay, so this is the part that I find really exciting, and we have 10 minutes for, and we'll probably have to leave into tomorrow to do this. What lessons should we draw from history? I am going to suggest that the primary purpose of history in sort of classical education is to build exempla for students. Okay, examples, stories, narratives that they have that they can draw lessons from. This idea really comes out of my growing, though not at all complete, knowledge of the progymnasmata exercises. I don't know how many of you are familiar with those or use them. I, at this stage, basically use some of the lower ones because I'm only going up through middle school. So fable and narrative, children learn to retell stories. And then the next step is the Kriya and Maxim exercises, where they take a wise saying and they then do 8 different things with it. And it doesn't create a beautiful essay that's very connected in and of itself. It's an exercise teaching you how to find proofs to support your argument. So you do an encomium praising someone, a paraphrase of it, cause, why it would happen, the opposite, but then the one's kind of of interest to us, an analogy, some way of explaining it, an example, where you find a historical or literary example. So if I have don't count your chickens before they hatch, we find somebody from history who planned he was going to win this battle, and he didn't. And I explain how that is an example of that maxim. And then they go on to do, giving testimony. So again, if you're reading primary sources, they might remember quotes or go back to those sources to find a quote from something, and this provides evidence. I think the wonderful thing about these is if students are learning this sort of mental ordering in middle school, I think it would help them tremendously when they have to write essays and defend that, where you have a thesis statement and you're defending this. So I think it has long-term benefits that would be quite helpful. Partly from my experience of working in writing centers with freshmen at universities and seeing they struggle with these things. How do I defend my argument? If students have these ways of doing it early on, it would help. And the only way they're going to become really proficient at these things is if they have a mental library of all kinds of knowledge. And history, I think, is one of the places they'll get a lot of that. I think this is probably, as far as I can tell, the main use for history before that sort of, mid-19th century, where we're going to teach history as more of a scientific sort of thing. People are reading history so they know these things and they connect them to other things to defend their own ideas as well. In addition, then, if this is kind of how you're looking at things that, here's somebody, and we connect to other things that we know, that is a way really of deepening knowledge. And this is one the progressive educators will actually agree with us on. If you can connect something you're learning to something you already know or something you've read somewhere else, it strengthens the knowledge for all of those things. So making intentional connections is very good. Stories that are going to support something, they're specific, so, Hannibal crossing the Alps, or, I don't know, give us a specific story, but they are also open to interpretation, because they're not necessarily proofs in and of themselves, but supporting evidence for arguments that are going to be made. So, let's say we have Napoleon trying to invade Russia in winter and being defeated by, General Winter. So, you could just go with, okay, we could say, well, this is support for the Princess Bride, never get involved in a land war in Asia, and CNN says. But it could also be, we could say, well, this is, you should plan ahead. This is, this would support the idea that you should not overreach your limits. This would support, so there are a lot of things that story could support. And we don't have to say, there is one lesson from this history. There's only one lesson, that's it, no. There are many things, many true lessons that can be drawn from this. I see this even with fables, that you see the same fable, and you get very different morals going along with it. So the ant and the grasshopper, I found about 5 different morals for it, but the 2 on the extremes, it is best to prepare for days of necessity. That's the moral you probably see with most. Okay, that's pretty positive. Okay, it's good to prepare. There's some negative ones. Idleness brings want. You better work. But then at the other extreme we get, there's a time for work and a time for play, which seems to be quite different. That doesn't say anything to me about get to work. So the same fable can support several different truths that we would want to know. So our rhetorical purpose, and this is where we think about rhetoric, your rhetorical purpose is going to indicate to you which one of these meanings is going to be the one that I want to use. So as we go through history then, in the actual teaching of history, you might start to have students think about, okay, what do we see from this? What could we learn from this? Is there just one possible meaning from this? And we're not calling for relativism that there's, anything you want. But we see, okay, it's a complex process, and there are multiple things that could be learned from the actions of people. On top of all of that, there is the difficulty of there being a fine balance between teaching virtue, instilling virtue in our students as part of a classical education, and not becoming moralistic. It's a tension that goes back and forth. We have to instill virtue in our students, or as I heard a quote somewhere yesterday, Luther saying, if we do not have the Scripture and the Word of God, the schools will become the wide gates to hell. If we do not teach our students to be moral human beings, we are doing worse than not educating them at all, because we are giving them the most dangerous weapons we possibly can and not giving them any morals to guide how they're using them. On the other hand, we can end up with simplistic sort of moralism or self-righteousness among our students, and that's not good either. So it is quite the balancing act, the tension as we go back and forth trying to figure out, okay, how can we do this? So all of this, I don't know if it's actually making sense, but I'm trying to look at history. This is part of the larger picture of what we are doing, how we are training our students to think and to act, and history should serve these purposes, I think. It is not something that is just by itself, but actually is feeding all of the crucial things that we want to do with language and with morality. This is kind of the place I think that history should be taking for us. Okay, I think that's my time for today. So what I will do tomorrow is we'll pick up the rest of this, because I would really like to continue looking at this. And then we'll kind of go quickly through the pedagogy things. I will bring some books that you can look at tomorrow. As I said, I don't have anything perfect to recommend to you. If you were hoping for that, look for somebody else. I don't know, any questions for today or things that you would like clarifying tomorrow or anything else? All right. Sorry to talk so fast and furious for half an hour. Okay. And to ruin the board. Oh boy.
There's some tissue that might work.
I think it's empty. I hope. I'm just afraid. Was this not a board I was supposed to write on, and I totally ruined it?
No, I think they can clean it. Just to clean
I
it.
was just ask them, because I'm supposed to use
But she's got her clean.
What's that?
She brought me a marker. There were no markers, and they brought me one, and oh my gosh.
But maybe she had, no, it's okay.
I
All right,
know.
because it's the ones that I used to, she said, don't have it right on, but then when somebody does,
You can figure out
clean it
something
off.
that.
They do.
Yeah.
Oh my
So I
goodness.
think
It wasn't even that important. We could have just moved this thing over.
it's fine.
I think that's a pointer
That's
thing.
That's
What you're supposed to
That's
write
what
on
you're
there.
supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, why weren't you here? You left to go
I
get
caught it
coffee,
too late.
and
I
you.
caught it too
I
late.
know.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I know. They're not even lovely drawings. Oh my goodness. All right.
But I
Do not
think
miss
he's
the mark.
absolutely right, because if you look, there's a lot of stuff on there. So.
You know how to clean Promethean boards?
I don't, but I've seen people do it before.
Yeah.
I know people, I've seen people write on them before, and they ended up clean the next day, so.
Because I see kids writing on them with
It occurred to me as you started writing on it, I didn't know what it was.
I know. It's like, I think this
It
feels
sounded
okay.
weird. No, it feels like Pokemon.
All right. Great.
But your presentation was good.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I'm glad. No, but it's the projector. Yeah. Yeah, and then where would it, onto what does it project? I know. I guess we need to.
I'm going to get a bump there.
Oh, good. Is there AV here, Erica, or?
I took all the markers out of here so that this wouldn't happen. I have no idea how to clean it. I don't know.
Well.
Pam, what do you?
Kelly? You're not going to challenge yourself by Euclid?
That's right, I got it right here.
Okay. I didn't make it worse, so we'll just wait. We're going to Google it.
Maybe some window cleaner?
We're going to Google it. So,
That's what I'm doing.
yeah. Oh, that's what you're doing right now? So, can you just decide that we don't put white things on there?
Yeah, I don't have anything to write.
Okay.
I checked this because I thought you're going to want to take this out of the
Yeah,
room again.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the only reason I picked it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You were in there.
I know some people who do that, so I want to hear more about it. I noticed that Reverend Cholak is doing his topic on the importance of other languages, but he's offering it also tomorrow, so I was torn between your session and his, so I'm going to yours today.
I'm going to his tomorrow too, so.
Yeah.
Because that is
So is that on Google?
Yes.
I'm supposed to be running for someone else's presentation right now, so do you want to
Oh,
try to
I
wipe
can certainly
this?
clean that, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, but
No,
it's
that's fine.
alcohol-free product, so
Good.
I think it's working really well.
Good.
Thank you.
Certainly. This is the screen. For, computers, and someone thought it was a whiteboard
Oh.
in the last session, and Erica about panicked. Because she said,
I don't even know how to clean it.
So they Googled how to clean a projector screen that someone mistook for a whiteboard. And apparently non-alcoholic whites are the trick.
I can face this one on my friend's library.
Well, this is working pretty well, but they want me to get it off immediately, so that's my first task. So while we're doing that, why don't we introduce ourselves? Because one of the things that's difficult at a large conference like this, where there are classroom teachers and homeschoolers, is that the poor homeschoolers don't know who else is homeschooling. One year we did a name tag with an H on it, so that everybody could find find the homeschoolers, because it's really important to have that support. So while I'm attempting to clean the projector board, I'll start and then I'll get back to cleaning. My name is Cheryl Swope. I am first and foremost a mom of twins. They're a boy and a girl, whom we adopted when they were babies. They were just one at the time. We were told that they had some special needs. I have a master's in special ed, so that didn't frighten me. And we wanted children, had prayed for children. Married 5 years, really wanted children. And when you go to adopt, they encourage you to say what you would like. We really wanted eventually a boy and a girl. And we wanted them to be under 2 so that we could help them the most, we felt. And also we had been on this vast theological odyssey through essentially legalism, just in various forms. And we had, by God's grace, come to the foot of the cross and had found the gospel found us. And we wanted to give that same freedom in Christ to our children. So then we got this phone call, and we had only been licensed days. And the worker said, we have a boy and a girl, they're 1. Would you be interested? They have some mild special needs. I said, would I be interested? Oh my goodness. So it was this rush. We turned our library into a nursery, and started teaching them at home. Very soon they qualified for the public school special ed program. And as a teacher, I thought that was great. But as a mommy, I didn't really want my children in that. I knew the track that they were going to go. They were going to be progressively educated. There was going to be no faith-based instruction, and I thought, well, we'll homeschool them. We'll see how this goes. I'll get them ready for kindergarten, and then we can send them to our local classical school, because in St. Louis we have one. In fact, my pastor is here. He sent his daughter there. And it's a classical Christian school. I thought, well, let's get them all ready to go. Well, they turned 4. They still had as many special needs as they did when they came to us, but it sort of unfolded into more. Autism, learning disabilities, attention difficulties, all manifesting themselves in pretty large ways. Their biological mother had schizophrenia. They developed it too over time, so we just kept homeschooling. So I'm very grateful for the option to homeschool. They had a classical Lutheran education at home. Their story is told in the book Simply Classical, because you can bring it to any child. Simply Classical, a beautiful education for any child, which ties in with the theme. It is a pedagogy and theology of using So that's my story. My children are now, we started saying, well, we'll just take it a year at a time. They graduated not too long ago and are both doing quite well thanks to the liberal arts. My son loves history, works in a history museum, can't go to college, but he works in a history museum. On his bad days with his schizophrenia, kind of a bipolar schizophrenia, on his bad days he works in his kingdom, they call it for him. It's his office off to himself, and he cleans artifacts. On his good days, he's quite articulate and knowledgeable, and he gives tours of this little museum and the historic homes in our town because he knows so much, not only about the homes, but the historical context of the homes. So when people ask about Founding Fathers, the American Revolution, he's right there, and the world context within which that occurred. My daughter is not quite so capable, but she has a love of words. She's a child who had a pragmatic language disorder when she was little. And words perplexed her, boggled her mind. But now she writes beautiful, poignant Christian poetry, images of the sacraments woven throughout. If you were to Google Michelle Swope on Amazon, you would see her little book of poetry. So I also serve on the board of the Consortium for Classical Lutheran Education, because otherwise homeschoolers would be forgotten. Because Lutherans are very proud of their day schools. A new development, though, having worked with CCLE, is that I work with Synod, too. Synod is now recognizing that there are families really dedicated to catechesis, really dedicated to a strong education. So Synod recently commissioned a book on Lutheran homeschooling. And guess who's publishing it? The ultimate irony. LCMS School Ministry. And guess who wrote the foreword? Some of you already know. Well, Pastor Henriksen knows because he served as copy editor for the book, thankfully. The Reverend Dr. Matthew Harrison. So we are definitely getting more attention, and it is becoming more important for families to homeschool because our day schools have slipped so far from our Lutheran heritage, some theologically, but mostly pedagogically, and we can reclaim that within our homes, if nothing else. So that's why we are here today. Okay, I'm going to finish cleaning the board.
Good.
Pardon me?
Can I do it for you?
Can you what?
Do it for you?
That would really be nice. Thank you. All right, so let's kind of quickly go around. First, just raise your hand if you are actively homeschooling. Okay. And if you hope to be homeschooling, raise your hand. Okay, or not sure. How many have been homeschooling for 5 or 10 years? Oh, wow, okay, so we have some veterans in here too. And how many are just curious about the topic, I suppose? Okay, excellent. All right, we will try to plug this in. I think that will work. And I think actually that may be the form that our intros take, simply because we should probably begin. I could say now that we have more people, I think that our time would be spent in introductions. So essentially we have some homeschoolers, some non, and some just curious.
At the public school that I taught in, we had a classroom where an opposing basketball team came in and used our classroom for their in-between halftime show, or whatever, they visit and make their plans, and they wrote their stuff on the smartboard. Like
their game plan?
Yeah, their game plan. Yeah, it was awful.
Okay, then we have another technical issue that this doesn't seem to be projecting onto the screen. At the larger conferences, they give you, oh good, and this is all being recorded. They give you they give you tech support at larger pieces.
Is the projector on?
The light is blinky, so it looks like it. Mine takes forever to warm up.
Well, but it's Okay. Well, I have some lovely art, and it may go unseen. We will save it. All right. In this session, we're going to do 5 things. These are my backup slides because you just never know. We want to talk about the benefits of homeschooling, generally, the pitfalls of homeschooling, the beauty in homeschooling, and then if we have time, some logistics. So the benefits, the pitfalls, the beauty of homeschooling, and some logistics that are just common questions that we get. So why homeschooling? Why would people homeschool, especially in a synod where we have so many day schools? How many of you have gone to Melinda Heine's, she's here, Melinda Heine's sessions on progressive? Okay. If you've been to those, then you know well why many of us homeschool. It's not just for those reasons. One benefit of homeschooling is flexibility. So, these will appear in bullet points. Does anybody have any other ideas on how to make that work? Yeah, sometimes there's like that.
Or can you move the projection board and write on the dry erase board?
That's a good idea. That's how I teach at home anyway.
Well, thank you. Have fun here, Cheryl.
That's right.
I have an idea, man.
You knew you came for some reason. All right.
Okay, well now it's stopped.
Now you gotta move that table.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to bring it this?
We're doing old.
Well,
Yeah, you might need to take the other way to record.
it's okay, because we don't need the...
You got room on that white space there.
Yeah, it's fine. Oh, you know what? They took the marker so no one would ever write on it again.
Okay,
All right.
remote, give me the remote.
All right.
I spent 2 years of my last year getting a technician certification. I need to justify my life.
All right.
Have you
You do
unplugged
it.
it now from your computer?
No, it's got a light, at least.
No, but I mean,
something.
Yep.
there's the monitor to go back onto the computer.
You're right.
Here, my first grader should be.
Good. All right, well, as they're hoping to get it back up. So flexibility is one benefit of homeschooling. If you have children with special needs, if you have lots of children, if you have a mission family or military family, you need to move around, homeschooling allows you to do that. So flexibility is a benefit. Remember that because there is a pitfall to that. Another is control and autonomy. Flexibility, control, autonomy. You have control over what your children learn. And you have autonomy more than in any other setting to make sure that you are, in fact, yay. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Do you want to cut
Everything.
off the lights on the overhead?
Maybe not, at least one, maybe not all of them, but maybe both, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. So there you go. Maybe both.
You can probably
Yeah.
cut them off for.
Yeah, there's enough ambient light
Right.
that people can...
Yay! All right, can we have a round of applause here? Yay! Teamwork. All right. So yes, I serve on the board for the consortium. I am a homeschooling mom, author of Simply Classical, A Beautiful Education for Any Child. We have that available at the conference. We're down to our last copy, but if you call Memorial Press, the number's right by the book on our table, and say CCLE, I saw it at CCLE, they will give you free shipping and just send it to you. They just told me that. Eternal Treasures, Teaching Your Child at Home, that's the book that's coming out from Synod. Martin Luther said that parents are quite likely to take care of their children's bodies, very concerned about that, their bodies, their clothing, their shoes, earning money, and all of us today get
caught up in that, but that we are to tend to their souls, because they are, our children are, eternal treasures. That's where the title came from. Okay. And our benefits. So we mentioned flexibility, control, and autonomy. You have the ability to catechize your child with Lutheran catechesis in your home. You can't find that at some classical Christian schools. The ACCS schools, they won't do that. The Catholic classical schools won't do that. Public schools won't do that. And you can do that in your home. Homeschooling nurtures family life in a way unparalleled in our society. You can read books together. You can learn Latin together. You can read the Holy Scriptures again and again and again together, daily. There's time for that, to nurture family life. It is efficient. There is no lining up to go to the cafeteria. There is no lining up for the bus. There is no bus. There's none of that lost time that happens in the institutional setting. And oddly enough, a benefit of homeschooling is socialization. You can raise kids who are engaged in learning and engaged in conversations with adults in ways that sometimes is stifled in a classroom setting, especially a classroom that doesn't value that dialectic and rhetoric, but has kind of forgotten that. Or as Dr. Calvert said, rhetoric becomes journaling at age 6, where you don't even have anything to say yet, and you don't have the tools with which to say them. Instead, in the setting of homeschooling, you can truly employ the Socratic questioning in a way that's sometimes difficult to do in a classroom of 30 children. And by the way, grammar, logic, rhetoric. How many of you have read The Well-Trained Mind? Okay. That book was very helpful for us to systematize kind of what we're doing in the early days of the recovery that was in the 90s. We need to move beyond that. We'll talk about it more tomorrow in the session, Classical Christian Education Simply Defined. It's time that we move beyond ages and stages and realize that the liberal arts are so much broader than that. And we teach rhetoric when we ask our 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds questions. We're teaching oral language. Quintilian was an ancient Roman orator. He has 2 books about early childhood education, essentially. The Institutio Oratoria, and he was 70 AD. He emphasized the oral language spoken in the home. He wanted the nurses to speak well, that was their qualification. That was because in Rome, the pinnacle of classical education was oratory, but it's still essential for us. We can do those sorts of things so that the language, the manners, the habits, the work ethic, the idea that learning is enjoyable, we can pass all of those things on in our homeschools in ways that the so-called socialization erodes. And we can teach the faith. So those are the benefits of homeschooling. We're able to bring a family culture of books in a sea of electronic distraction. How many of you have heard of SSR as a technique? Sustained silent reading. Well, after this conference, I decided we need SSA. We need sustained silent art gazing. All right, so those same benefits, unfortunately, can also become pitfalls. And we have to be honest, homeschoolers are no less prone to wayward tendencies than anyone else. That flexibility, you don't have that accountability, well, that can become a little bit lazy where, well, we won't necessarily start at the same time every day, and, maybe we won't have school today because I feel a little sick, or you feel a little sick, or there are just all kinds of things that can make us more prone, not make us more prone, but allow for us to be more prone to be inconsistent. We have to watch for that. So while flexibility is a great thing and a freedom, we really have to guard ourselves against that. One way we always started at 8:25, period. We had a consequence if you weren't ready, and you had to have your morning jobs ready by 8:25. Morning jobs were written on the board, so there was no excuse for, I forgot to brush my teeth. It's there. And if you didn't show up at 8:25 ready to go, that meant books, pencils, in your seat, dressed, of course, bed made. Then, in the early days, it meant, in the early days of our homeschool journey, it meant 30 minutes bedtime earlier, because the only thing I can figure is that you're really tired and just couldn't get up early enough to get yourself ready. Well, as kids grow into those teen years, they didn't mind that as much. It was actually middle school, I guess, is when we switched to the dollar fine. So if they were not ready to go at 8:25, they were fined $1. That was huge, because in our house, we don't give money freely. And so they had to pay a fine, and it was marked on the board who had fines, and then if they wanted to buy something, you got a late fine. So we enforced a start time. Our only exception, and as Lutherans you'll get this, during Advent and Lent, on Thursdays, because of the Wednesday service, I would start at 8:55. Now why the 5? Having kids with special needs, especially autism, we always needed an overview. I had to tell them what was going to happen that day. It was on the board, and then I did a vertical, what was going to happen that day, but I also had a horizontal, what was going to happen that week. So, and I still do. It's still on our board. My son will come down the stairs, and if I haven't put it up, Mom, today doesn't exist. It exists, it's just not on the board yet. So, where were we? Flexibility. So, not everyone has to have a schedule. Some people prefer to have an order of tasks rather than following the clock, and that's perfectly fine. And you want to put your priorities first. Most people do Latin, math, and music. Make sure those get done with catechesis at the top. Do your Bible reading first. That sets the tone for the day, too, that it's all about forgiveness. That's important first. But then Latin, math, and music can be at the top. Make sure you get those done by lunch. And it can just be tasked. And sometimes you want to delve more deeply, and maybe you're not following the clock. That's all right. But we just don't want to get sloppy. Control can sometimes be a pressure cooker situation where you have so much control that you're kind of too micromanaging your lives in a homeschool. You want to make sure that you have time to breathe, that everybody gets outside a lot, that everybody has friends, including Mom. It's important not to be so controlling that we get restrictive. Nurturing environment can become, similar to this, too much, where we're not letting them go out and do things. When this opportunity for a history class came up when my son was 14, I thought, we're doing so much, and I don't know if he can handle this. He has Asperger's, autism. He gets tired easily, but I thought he loves history, though. I've got to give him a chance to do it. So I did, and who knew? He's now been working at that history museum for 6 years. The efficiency where you think, I mean, you've probably heard it. You can homeschool in 90 minutes a day. Have you heard of that? Anybody? I mean,
We're done by noon. We
Yeah.
don't start till 10, and we're done by noon.
I had a homeschooling, or a friend who was thinking about homeschooling, and she said, well, is it true you can do it in 90 minutes a day? Well, I don't. I don't know anyone that does, but it is more efficient than 6 hours a day. I do know that. But sometimes we get into like, okay, we did our math, we checked it all off, and we forget to go deeply. Dr. Christopher Perrin, who is a friend of mine, do you know him, Dr. Calvert from Classical Academic Press? I figured. He has this idea of, what does he call it? Delve Deeply Day or something like that, where he encourages people to just take a day to just immerse yourself in learning. It could be art, it could be music, it could be science, but kind of set those daily grind things aside and get back into the appreciation. I even like quadrivium appreciation, where you just, the wonder of mathematics, let's restore that. We get so STEM-oriented that we want to restore the wonder in all of the elements. The quadrivium, those are the maths, and which we'll talk about more tomorrow, but there is wonder in math. It's not just getting your math problems done. We want to be able to do that. Socialization, there are a lot of benefits in homeschooling where you can get into co-ops now, there's classical conversations, there's 4-H, Boy Scouts, any number of things. Sometimes homeschoolers are so busy trying to make up for the perceived loss of socialization that they forget that home education, they forget the education part, and so we don't want to do that. And then teaching the faith. Sometimes, because we are the ones teaching the faith to our children can start to think that we're the only ones that believe it. Especially if, like us, you live in a Roman Catholic town, and we truly are. It's really important to bring in other people to help. In our case, we're about to start, I hope, an adult study class for our children. But we had our children in adult Sunday school for years so they could hear the pastor. And then we met up with other Lutheran families, and that's why this is so important. We had a family friend in Wisconsin. They homeschooled, and we're in Missouri, but it was worth it to us. We got together at least 2 or 3 times a year. We did things like the zoo, but the main thing was we were all praying the same prayers at mealtime. We went to church together, and they saw that there are truly other families who are Lutheran. It's more important as they get older, of course. Okay, so how do we make the beauty of homeschooling? How do we make it a beautiful way to learn? Order. We keep hearing that order in our aesthetics talk and everything, that order is important. It's good to have that order in the home. Dr. Perrin even calls it having a liturgy in your home. The bookends of how you greet your children in the morning and how you put them to bed at night, having a pattern, something that's predictable and that's soothing to us, and it's definitely soothing to our children. Time to relax. We're free to do that, and time to have relationships with other people, neighbors, extended family, and spouse, making sure that the home is not so covered with globes and maps and timelines that when you have friends over, they're conjugating verbs and Latin. We did have a seminary student who appreciated that, though. He was over for dinner, and there are all my Latin verbs. We're eating dinner. He's like, oh, I can practice my Latin right now. I'm eating dinner. This is great. You want to regulate your outside commitments. Touched on that with socialization. But it's not just the kids' commitments, it's the mom's commitments during that season of homeschooling. I was definitely not going to conferences, writing curriculum. I mean, I was not doing that sort of thing during that season of homeschooling. A lot of people have to work, but that's not usually what trips us up. It's the things, getting guilted into, guilting ourselves into being the choir director and, all of those good things. They're good things, but not during the season when you're a full-time teacher. And you have to remember that you're a full-time teacher. That's your vocation during those years. So there will be a season for a lot of things later. It goes by fast, but not during homeschooling. And reading good books together. We look back now, and that is my husband's favorite thing, favorite memory of homeschooling, are all the books that we read. We're not unusual in that one summer, it was longer than a summer, but my husband started The Hobbit with the kids. So, we don't want to read this. We don't want to read this. And, of course, they were just drawn into that language, the Tolkien language, immediately. So I'm like, are there more? As a matter of fact, there's a whole trilogy. So that trilogy became their read aloud. And it was great because I would lose my voice teaching so much. So that was the thing he could do. He was not a follow a lesson plan kind of a guy, but he loved reading books with the kids. They read through the entire trilogy and begged, it's like, Dad's home. It's like, okay, give him a minute.
Did he like reading before? Was he like a...
Oh, my husband? No, that's a great question.
My husband is engineering mind and is really, he doesn't understand why I have books and books and books, all these children's books that we haven't even touched yet. I've just amassed them.
Okay, actually that's a different question than the one I thought you were asking.
Well,
here's the thing.
Really have to remind him to read to the kids.
But here's what he could do. He could do math with them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he can draw. Your kids are little.
Similar.
Her oldest is 4.
Yeah.
And she's got 3 total. He could draw patterns on the sidewalk in sidewalk chalk and have the kids copy those patterns. I mean, whatever your spouse is good at doing and loves doing, have them do that. That's all. Yeah, right. But no, my husband didn't start out reading. It was sort of like they were on the sofa, I remember, on the sofa in front of the fireplace. And I'm like, they were little, could you just read Caps for Sale? Because I need to go, whatever, make dinner. Or I was tired. And I mean, he was hooked really pretty quickly with those early Blueberries for Sale, all those great children's literature. And then remember to enjoy what you're doing. Not always. I mean, sometimes you just have to do it. It's just a work thing. I love that. Have a good day of hard work. I love that, because usually people send their children off to school, or even Sunday school. Have fun. Yeah, that's what it's all about. And I'm not saying that. Cheryl Lowe, who I just love, do you know her too?
Yeah.
Yes. She has a great article at the memoriapress.com website. Articles, Is Learning Fun? And she says students, just so much like what you said, students want to be taken seriously, and they want to take their work seriously. They want it to be real, and they know that to be real it has to be hard. And then the sense of accomplishment at the end is greater. So enjoy it, but that does not mean that you have to be entertaining or that all learning will be enjoyable. The beauty of homeschooling. And with that new SSA, just gazing at you can ask questions. You can say, what do you think, looking at their faces, how do you think that music sounded? And maybe then you put on some chamber music and just listen to that while you're looking at the paper or at the painting. Where's the light source coming from? who's sitting in the picture who doesn't have an instrument but who's enjoying all of it and who's part of the family every bit as much. You know, all of those sorts of things. You can bring beauty into your home. So we covered the benefits, the pitfalls, in a cursory way, and the beauty of homeschooling. I do want to touch on some logistics for those just thinking about homeschooling, because we get questions about this a lot. Legal matters. These will be our logistic sort of things. How do I handle everything that I have to do in the family and the household? Remembering the education and home education. What about those teen years, high school? Can I homeschool through high school? Should I homeschool through high school? And then, above all, that's where we're going next, these things. All right, legal matters. This is really important. And as Lutherans, we understand that we live simultaneously in two kingdoms. In the kingdom of the left hand, we need to be really good citizens in our homeschool. We have to keep good records. We need to do what is required. Right now, if only for a brief time, I don't know how much longer homeschooling will be legal, but right now it is legal. Different states enjoy different freedoms. This website is great, whether in the United States or that's the Canada version. They have a map. You click on your state. They will show you all of the organizations available, homeschool groups. You won't find many Lutherans in these groups. Join them just at your own discretion. But the main thing is that you'll have all of the laws, the requirements. They'll tell you how many hours of instruction you must have, what kinds of records you need to keep. Is it annual testing, or is it just a portfolio of progress? And you want to comply with the law. But HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, they recommend that you do only what is required. There is no need to submit things to your public school if your public school is not asking for them. You don't have to notify if the law does not require you to notify. You're urged not to draw attention to yourselves in that kingdom if it's not needed. So whatever is needed, you must have a daily log or whatever, do that. Period. But you don't need to do more. Okay, so we talked about, we were going to hit on legal matters, family and household, the education and home education. What about the teen years? And then above all, just refreshing where we are. I know you've been through lots of sessions. All right, family and household. This is, in any homeschooling conference you go to, this is the big thing. How do I do all of this? How do I wear so many hats? There's even a session, this one kind of rock star homeschooler speaker, she has something called So Many Hats or something like that. Lately, the last 2 years since the book came out, I've been at these, they're called Great Homeschool Conventions. Has any of you attended those? I had never even heard of them, and yet they're very great. They're truly large. 10,000 people attend these things regionally. So there's one in Cincinnati, California, and my favorite part of it is they don't know what to do with all us classical folks, so they put us all together in an aisle. That's where I got to meet Dr. Perrin and got to really know Andrew Kern, and we're all together right there. So that's the great thing about those conferences. We all get to just, and Martin Cothran was, walks the room. Do you know him too? Okay. Anyway, so that's a wonderful thing. But they're all confused by this in the homeschooling world in general, and I just believe it's because they don't know vocatio. As Lutherans, we understand. Yes. We have many simultaneous vocations, and that's okay. Those are all gifts from God. Do we all manage them at the same moment? No. So there's a time for things, but we must make time for all the vocations in our lives. So I put this at the top because as moms, those babies come, and I know somebody who said, I thought I loved my husband until I had my baby. And it's like, oh no, you're going to really have a hard time. We have to remember to love our husbands and our babies. And I think the key there is see to it, I think it's 1 Peter, see to it that she respects her husband. That's what he wants. He doesn't want to be belittled, he doesn't want to be nagged, he doesn't want to be mothered, he wants to be respected. And so if he doesn't want to go on a date, or if he does want to go on a date, or if he wants you to sit out and talk with him while he's fixing the car, whatever his thing is, or watch sports with him, or whatever, we have to make time for that role. We're still wives or husbands. I was in a homeschooling session, and there was a dad there, and I think it was the only dad, so I'm glad that you guys are here. But he said, what as dads can we do to help our wives? And I said, just take her out to dinner. That's really the best thing you can do, is just keep remembering that you have that vocation too. Moms and dads. Chores have to be done. The great thing about homeschooling is that children can do them too. And they're learning things as they do that. They're learning that they are part of the family. They're needed. And as they get older, we get older. So the things they're able to do actually help us. My husband can't cut the grass and work full time and do all of these things anymore. He's getting older, but my son now can cut the grass. With his special needs, he can't drive a car, but he can cut the grass on the riding mower because the trees don't move. There's nothing really to navigate except just the things that are stationary. There's no incoming information, so he can do that. And he's very proud that he can take care of the yard. He misses a lot of stuff because he's got visual spatial issues too. But so then he has now learned to weed eat. So that's how he makes up for his mistakes. The chores, weave that into your home life. Now, in some homeschool settings, they would call that school, because those are life skills. But we're not calling it school. We're just saying that that's a vocational thing that our children can help us with early on. We do not want to be the sole person doing all the chores. That's not necessary, and it's not healthy for the kids either. Homeschooling lends itself to that more than when the kids are out all day, I think. They're right there. And it's a great break. It's a recess of sorts, where you can do a Latin lesson, and then, okay, now for 15 minutes, let's set the timer, we're going to straighten up the house. Go. And room by room, let's just straighten up the house. And you're moving, and it's a nice little mental break, and then you come back. So you can squeeze those things in. Sibling relationships. Many people who are homeschoolers talk about how homeschooling strengthens the bonds between siblings. I don't know if that always happens. It does seem like there's a greater respect for people who are not all in 4th grade. You can think about older and younger children more flexibly in a homeschool situation, it seems. It's definitely true for us. I mean, the closeness of my kids is, I just don't think it would have happened if one had gone to a special school and the other one had been homeschooled, for example. That's why there's a curriculum now for special needs, classical Christian education. It's called the Simply Classical curriculum, because I want, whether the child is in school with his siblings and has the special needs and otherwise has to be deported to public school, I want him to be able to stay there Or if it's in the homeschool, and a family wants to homeschool, I want them to be able to keep that child in that family culture or that school culture. So it's based on the book, Simply Classical, and it's through Memoria Press, and it's Cheryl Lowe's vision of embracing us as special needs homeschoolers. So my children have grown so strong by being together through thick and thin all these years. I was getting my hair done before a conference, which as a homeschooling mom you don't have to worry about it, but then when you're speaking you do. So it's the same gal I've gone to in our small town since my kiddos were 4, now they're 20. And I was turned around. They always have to come with me. They're just my sidekicks. They come with me everywhere. They always have, always will, as long as I can manage that. So they were with me. They brought their books. They know the drill, that it's going to take an hour for me to get my hair done. And they have to sit there. Well, my daughter started to feel faint. She has a lot of medical issues, and she got really pale. She was kind of trembly. And Michael was there, though, Michael and Michelle. And I knew he would take care of her if something came up. And sure enough, I was turned because she was doing my hair, and Dana, the gal, she goes, "Cheryl, look." And I looked out the window, and there's a bench outside, and Michelle had her head on Michael's shoulder, and he had his arm around her. And I know that he knew she just needed some fresh air and some, maybe the fumes of the place were getting to her, her sensory system isn't what it should be, or whatever it was. But I looked out, and it was just the sweetest thing to see that bond. And I've heard them say, you know, her hair will be all over the place, and he'll comb it. And she'll say, what would I, or no, he'll say, he says to her, this was just the other day, what would I do without you, Michelle? And she said, what would I do without you? Anyway, okay. All right, so I miss my children now. Friendships. That's another vocation. We still have that as homeschooling moms. You want to maintain your girlfriend friendships. It's good to go out for lunch. It's good to go out with other homeschooling moms and just talk about what's going on and how you might do things better. It's good to come here annually, if you can, at all, swing it, and put it in your educational budget. Schools do budgets for teacher training in service. Our homeschools, we need to budget for that too. If only the refreshment of being in the chapel with that music. I thought, okay, I got to hold it together. This is so beautiful. I'm crying. It's that poignancy of beauty that we're restored by, and that companionship. So you do wear a lot of vocational hats, and it's okay. It's God-given. We want to remember the education in home education. We will touch on all of these things tomorrow in that session. Classical Christian education, simply defined. But just briefly, we want all of these components going on in our home schools. We want to remember that it is an enculturation. Education is enculturation. We are passing on a culture that's been given to us over the last over 2,000 years. And we're giving that to our children. The great books. And there's a nice website that's called, I don't know if it's called this, but if you Google it, you'll find it. 1,000 Good Books Before You Get to 100 Great Books. Christine Miller, the homeschooler, who loves to compile lists. So she's a great resource. 1,000 Good Books Before the 100 Great Books. And any of the good publishers will have this. Memoria Press, their literature is just perfect. Their choices. They will just go through hundreds of books to find the one to put in their deep study for 3rd grade. Because as you know, there are many, many children's books that are not in that category. Latin, for sure. You can start as early as 2nd grade. As soon as you have phonics and solid reading skills, you can start. I don't intend this to be a pitch fest. It's just that I know Memoria Press well because I've worked with them now for, I shouldn't say for so long, but so intensely. Prima Latina is a wonderful little introductory course. It's not flashy, but it's beautiful and orderly, just like Mrs. Lowe. She wears her hair in a bun, and she's elegant, and everything she produces is orderly and clean. There's no visual clutter, there are no cartoons, it's not an assault. It's easy to teach, and from Prima Latina in 2nd grade or above, whenever you need to start, then there's Latina Cristiana 1. That's what we used. It's usually a 1-year program for my special needs kiddos. We did it steadily, tortoise in the hare, slow and steady. It took us 3 years, but we completed that course. We then went on to 2, and before they graduated, we completed that course too. So they were getting into imperfect future, past tense, and doing some little translation. And they both want to keep going. And I've neglected restarting, but it's another thing from this conference. We are definitely starting back up. They begged me to, we want to go on to First Form Latin. And I haven't done it, but I need to do that. The other thing about Latin is that when we did start Latina Cristiana 1, I was able to get rid of a lot of other things. I didn't need English vocabulary anymore. I didn't need English grammar anymore. It was all embodied in Latin. There's a good book called The Latin-Centered Curriculum. The Latin-Centered Curriculum. It's not that you're adding Latin to this burden. You are focusing on Latin, and when you do, it kind of clears the way. It streamlines your homeschool. As an example, my daughter had testing when she was 3. She scored in the lowest 6th percentile of anyone that age in the area of vocabulary. Lowest 6th percentile, bell curve, so she was here. Well, I'm sorry, she's here. 6th percentile at age 3. Then she had Latin roots, Greek roots. We did those rummy roots when they were little, like 5 and 6. And then we did formal Latin for a long time. So then by 5th grade, she was tested again. And you have to have lots of testing when your kids have special needs. It's just required. So we tested again. Going into 5th grade, with 100 being average, and she was at the 6th percentile, guess where she scored after all of the Latin? In English vocabulary. Where do you think she ended up?
95.
So at the 100, now keep in mind her IQ test about 75, so you would expect it to be commensurate with that. 130 in the gifted range. And I've had people telling me you can't do classical education with special needs children. And that was pretty much, okay, that got my attention. I think I can. And today her vocabulary really is stunning given the IQ. She tested a borderline intellectually disabled, which is just the fancy new term for that borderline mentally handicapped, her IQ, but her vocabulary is in the post-secondary range, and it's just thanks to a classical education. It is not me. I taught poorly with progressive education right out of grad school. I was not a good teacher, and that's what persuaded me too. I know it's not myself, because I've done this ineffectively. It's classical education. It's the pedagogy that made a difference. It became our anchor for everything. Latin. The liberal arts, that is our educational core. Talk more about that tomorrow. The language arts, essentially, it's the real language arts, the original language arts, and the mathematical arts. That's all that means. Language arts, not literally, but it is language arts and mathematical arts. And the Holy Scriptures. We've heard the quote from Luther. We want our schools to be, our home schools, to have the Holy Scriptures, of course, and the Lutheran confessions. Both of my children, despite their learning disabilities, have read through the entire Lutheran confessions. That new Book of Concord, the Reader's Book, our pastor took us through, it took years, in our Bible class to go through, and I wanted them to have that. They'd been confirmed, but, that's just the beginning, right? And so they went and sat through that class, and we went through the whole Lutheran confessions. And our story is that and Michelle will say this, if I can do it, if my kids can do it, your kids can definitely do it. You can do this with your own children. Give them a real education in your homeschool. From the time of Augustine, Cassiodorus, and then 1,000 years later, Martin Luther, Philip Melanchthon, we know that they not only can be compatible, they are compatible. Classical education serves Christian education. It's both. Teen years, just quickly, yes, there's too many words on this slide, but yes, you can do this. There are online classes galore. Memoria Press has an online academy. Kelly here, she's used that with her children. Everybody has it now. Well-Trained Mind has an academy. Veritas Press has their Scholars Academy. We have our own Lutheran online academy now, Wittenberg. If you haven't stopped by their vendor place, you can see what they offer. And Pastor Henderson is a teacher there. A lot of the teachers are here. We have many online supports. It is not cheating. It is okay to use outside sources for the teens. You can do a teen book club. We did this. We had a Latin class at our local library. 2 other girls, homeschooled, joined us. After that, and they were very capable girls. They just had not had Latin. So after the class, they led a teen book club with my kiddos, going through the Iliad together with the Memoria Press study guide that accompanied it. And one of the girls was the scribe. The other girl read the Iliad out loud. So they all studied it together. You want that interaction. You want that going on in those teen years. You don't have to limit it to your kitchen table anymore. You probably shouldn't anymore in those later years. You can do transcripts, diplomas, the whole thing. There's a book called College Without Compromise that talks about dual enrollment. Take advantage of that when they're in the high school years. They can be dually enrolled in a college and get college credit for the sorts of things that you're studying, so that they're ahead of the game when they get there. So yes, you can homeschool through high school for sure. Lots of different things that you can do. There are debate teams, all kinds of things to address dialectic and rhetoric. But above all, you're a Lutheran homeschool. So despite the CBD catalogs and everything that's going to come through your home, be Lutheran. We have a new resource Melinda Heine and I just put together. It's at the vendor table. It's called a Curriculum Resource Guide for Classical Lutheran Education. We took all the resources in catechesis and math and English, everything from little bitty on up, and reviewed them from a Lutheran perspective, picked out the best ones, and put them in that guide so that you can have that. $20, all the work benefits these conferences, the work of the CCLE. So you can sift through all of the stuff that's out there. That's a guide that helps you if you would like. Make sure that the gospel predominates in the home. When my kids were in middle school, it was very trying. The mental illness was coming on, and so I called it Grace Lutheran Academy because I just needed to remember myself. And then our motto, our school verse, which was on the board, was Ephesians 2:8 and 9. which is why Michelle knows it so well. And
Her
then
kids are great in my Bible class, by the way.
they're lively and engaged.
I give them gold stars.
Yeah.
Literally, we have gold stars. If a
From the
person in the adult class makes a brilliant comment or question, I give them a gold star. And Michael and Michelle often are getting the gold star.
Right. Yeah, they love that. He's a good teacher because he brings that out. But we also memorized all of Ephesians, so that context. Not all of Ephesians, but all of Ephesians 1, leading up to 2 through 9. And we just said it every morning. That's how we memorized it. We just said it every morning so we all knew it. We want to make sure that that's the key. And we are not superhuman. We homeschool. We're not better than anybody else. We need to rest ourselves in the righteousness that has been given to us and know that even in our weakness, God is at work through us. If you've not yet read Dr. Veep's book, God at Work, that was the one that gave me the most calm ever because He's the one doing the work through us. And we're covered. We are covered. So that's the above all. And then you should have a resource coming out in September that is just rich because we pulled lots of homeschoolers, including published authors, pastors, to contribute. And it's just rich in comfort. Our other thing that we say very often, even when the days are very hard, the one thing we can always remember is that His mercies are new every morning. Thank you.